Alright, what's poppin', people? We're back, and if I sound a little out of energy right now, because I'm not feeling too well in the morning right at this moment. But I wanted to do one of the little spotlight videos. I wanted to cover Oricorio in this video. And I want to go over all three forms that we still have in Inu. Now, naturally, you're going to notice that all the sets are basically the same as we go between the Oricorios, and that's because, well, with Terra, they really do all function very similarly. You're just looking to get a Terra type that maximizes your potential use of the mechanic, whether it's from an offensive stance or a defensive stance. You've got a lot of the same defensive utility pre-Terra among each of the forms. In specific, you're looking at that fighting resistance, even the ground immunity. And then, I mean, since NU has so few defoggers, they can all defog too. So, I'll try and go over the minutia between all of the forms, talk about the differences. But just as a warning, you're going to see a lot of similarities. Now, of course, if you do enjoy this kind of content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you aren't already subscribed. We're going for 5K by the end of the year, and hey, one more subscription gets me closer to my goal, so let's go. So we're going to talk about Sensu first, because Sensu is the best one amongst them. Ghost has been a really potent offensive typing ever since the release of Pokemon X and Y, where they made it so Steel no longer resists Ghost-type attacks. And Oricorio-Sensu is a very solid setup sweeper. It's got a really nice offensive typing, not really anything is capable of resisting it outright, and so you look at a lot of these just generally good mid-ground plays like Umbreon, Chansey, even Muck, as Pokemon that are able to still defensively switch in and try and stop the sweep before it gets out of hand. Now, naturally, if we're looking at maximizing our Terra, Fairy is one of the best ones for doing that. Not only do you keep your fighting resistance, so you could still try and make use of a Passimian locked into CC as a chance to set up, but you also gain a super effective move to hit the dark types with, so you don't have to worry about an Umbreon walling you. You don't have to worry about a Zoroark revenge killing you as much, because you also get that Sucker Punch resistance. And it's just a generically good defensive typing as well, for, as we see here, a very bulky EV spread. I like going these fully physically defensive EV spreads on the Oricorios, because I do find that maximizing your safety versus a Passimian is honestly really valuable. Now, we'll talk about some of the other set adaptations more as we get to the other EV spread. I do want to quickly touch though on Terra Fighting as well. It's the same idea as Fairy really, where you gain a resistance to a common priority move, in this case Lycanroc's Accelerock, but you also get a super effective move for not only just the Dark type, but also for Chansey. It's still really hard to break through a Chansey, of course, and naturally, it could have Thunder Wave and just ruin your sweep right then and there, so it's still not foolproof, but it is still quite good, and the coverage of Fighting Flying is quite solid as well, giving you neutral for basically everything in the tier except for Rotom off the top of my head. And it just, of course, Ground is fine too. Terra Ground is nice if you're trying to set up against a Sandaconda, especially with this really bulky EV spread where its Earthquake won't do too much. Actually, no, Terra Ground is not for Sandaconda, it's for Chansey, my bad. You already beat Chansey pretty consistently anyway, as a normal Oricorio if they're not Thunder Wave, but when Chansey's got Thunder Wave, you want to have Terra Ground potentially. So, there you go. I don't know why I said Sandaconda. Now, I do want to also quickly touch on this faster EV spread. And I also want to talk about a nice little set adaptation that I've run a little bit, that's Substitute here. This does work on the slower EV spread as well, and I have run that before on this Oricorio, but I find that Substitute's generally better on the faster sets, just because it gives you more chances to get the sub up and actually scout Pokemon. So if you're up against a Choice Banded Mabostiff, you could sub first and see what move they're locking into, because if they go for Crunch, you could take that as a chance to Terra Fairy, and then just set up for free versus it with Revelation Dance, eventually force it out, and then get that sub back up. But Substitute's really good because without even needing to Terra, now you just completely use Chansey as setup fodder. The same thing applies to Umbreon too. If you go for your Terra, Umbreon, unless it is the Terra Ghost set with Curse, it just can't beat you once you've Terra'd and set up that sub. You're going to be able to quiver up to +6, and it's going to be a good time. So that's really all I wanted to touch on the faster EV spread. I think there's the benefit to it of having just a significantly better offensive matchup against a lot of Pokemon. So like if a Passimian gets knocked off, you know, you don't have to worry about it having Gunk Shot or outspeeding and using knockoff on you if you haven't used your Terra yet. You're faster than, like I mentioned, Choice Band and Mabostiff. There's a couple other things you're faster than as well, like Braviary. If you're running against an offensive set, you don't have to worry about that as much. You're faster than Honchkrow now, so it does have to try and play those sucker punch mind games, regardless of if you Terra or not. You're faster than non-Choice Scarf Medicham as well. There's just a lot that going faster does for you. I think the main question between the faster EVs and the slower EVs really comes down to the mirror. Because remember how Dancer works. Any dance move, you copy. Guess what? Revelation Dance is a dance move. And so there are a lot of interesting interactions in these Oricorio 1v1s, where being slower can often be good if you can assure yourself that you tank the Revelation Dance from your opponent's Oricorio. You could then Revelation Dance them back, use Revelation Dance on the same turn, and actually just 2-hit KO them a lot of the time. And then, of course, there's Defog Oricorio. I'm not going to say that Oricorio is a particularly amazing defogger. I don't think it is. It's not got the best of matchups against the common Stealth Rock setters. The main incentive to using it is that the Oricorios all have pretty alright defensive typings. And the main thing for them too is that Passimian CC resistance or immunity in the case of Oricorio-Sensu is often just a free turn to get off your defog. The Mon learns U-turn, so it's a good pivot, especially with the slower EVs. You can defog away hazards versus a lot of Pokemon, like we mentioned. You've got Roost for longevity. And I always opt for Air Slash on these sets. I think that's probably the best for Sensu, at least. Just making sure that you can hit those fighting types. Also gives you decent neutral damage against Sandaconda, which I find is okay. And versus Caparaja, I mean, you've got U-turn anyway, so it's not too bad. And I find Terra Ground to be pretty nice on these, because I'm going for the, like, overall best defensive Terra, and I feel like Ground is usually what you want on these Defog Oricorios instead of, like, maybe Fairy, even though that's a little bit better for Sensu specifically when looking at Pokemon that threaten it. Ground is still really nice because you can block Volt Switches now from, say, a Choice Scarf Rotom. You gain that Accelerock resistance like we mentioned earlier. And maybe you even need the resistance to Poison at some point versus a Toxicroak. I don't know. And a Natural Revelation Dance is still an option. I just don't find it to be as good on this set. I don't feel like going from Ghost to Ground is nearly as good as, say, with Pom Pom, how you went from Electric to Ground. There's not really that same sort of, like, flipping matchups on their head angle. Or with Pom Pom, okay, maybe there's an Electric type out versus you. Really only Jolteon in this case, because every other Electric type in this tier is immune to Ground. But it wasn't like that, where you could take that matchup and make it go from, you know, bad to good. And yeah, let's go to to Baile next. Oricorio-Baile does the same stuff as Sensu, except instead of going with Fairy or Fighting or even Ground, I think Grass is really good, because you're just looking to maximize the Vaporeon matchup as best you can. Also is really nice because it gives you a move to hit Sandaconda with, so you don't have to play a game of missing your Air Slashes at all, or Hurricane if you opt for that. I should, emphasize, of course, Hurricane is still a perfectly valid option on this set. Just generally, Air Slash I like more for its reliability. And then, of course, we've got the faster EV spread here, too. Now, I do want to talk about the defensive set a little bit more. I think that going Revelation Dance is a little bit better as your attack here, compared to Air Slash on the other Oricorios. Having a super effective move for Caparaja and even Berserker I find to be pretty valuable. Oricorio-Baile is unique in that way, in that you actually can threaten the Rockers, and Baile honestly has a really good Raja matchup too, since they don't run Rock Slide very frequently at all. So you're a defensive answer, and you can actually also take it on 1v1 in most cases, which is a pretty cool niche for it. And of course, Terra Ground is super practical for this one because it's, Omega weak to rocks and rock moves in general. So you definitely want to be tearing into a type that gets rid of your rock weakness entirely. That's super useful too because, of course, you are a Passimian switch-in, and if you're going to switch in and take a knockoff, you really don't want to be deciding for the rest of the game to take half your health from Stealth Rock. And now last we're going to talk about Pa'u. This is an Oricorio that really doesn't see any use right now, because Sensu is very similar to it, except better. You know, you're talking about really similar defensive profiles, you're talking about really similar checks as well, you know, the big emphasis on dark types. I think the cool thing for Pa'u, if I were to give it any sort of, like, you know, praise, is that versus Muck, you can hit it super effectively without needing to Terra. I don't know how important that really is, but it is kind of cool at least. Having a move to hit one of the most common special walls in the format, just off rip, is quite nice. That's really all I can say about this Pokemon. I mean, I think the difference between Pa'u and the other two mostly comes down to its defensive typing being noticeably a bit worse, as well as its offensive typing. Pa'u firmly falls into that group of Pokemon that is hyper-reliant on Terra to be a threat. Psychic Flying is just always going to be kind of easy to wall in any format with Steel types, and while you can of course always Terra into a Ground type and flip that matchup on its head, having to dedicate your Terra just to do that does have its drawbacks when you're looking at how these games often play out. If your opponent can avoid getting steamrolled by you once you've Terra'd, / you're just not able to make enough progress really once you've Terra'd, that could come back to bite you later on if your opponent's able to get a good Terra of their own going, and then just, you know, make use of the fact that you can't maybe defensively respond with your own Terra at that point, since you've burned it early, trying to sweep with an Oricorio. So I do think that this Pokemon, you know, especially compared to the other two, which just have better offensive and defensive typings, I think there are a lot more drawbacks to it, but like I mentioned, I draw specific attention to how you can hit Muck super effectively without the need to Terra. And I mean, fully resisting Metacham's attacks is kind of cool. You know, a lot of Metacham, they don't run a super effective move for Pa'u. If they're choiced, there's more of a chance that they will, but if you're running against a Life Orb one, oftentimes they're looking at running Dual Stabs, Bullet Punch, and then like Terra Blast Fairy. So there's at least something there going for it. Yeah, I mean, I just really don't like Pa'u as much as the others. I don't like the mons that feel like they have to Terra to be very impactful. But it's still a perfectly good option. That's going to be it though for this coverage of the Oricorios, guys. Like I had mentioned, they are all very similar in function. I think it really just comes down to Terra reliance, and then maybe what Terra you want based on the Pokemon. I should also mention Fairy is good on Pa'u. Naturally, a lot of the same weaknesses as Sensu, Fairy covers a lot of those. But yeah, I think Oricorio is a very interesting mon to look at in NU, because it feels like all of them run the same risk of being OP for the same reason of Terastallization enabling so much BS beyond just flipping a type. But we'll see, you know. I assume that we'll be voting on Oricorio-Sensu within a week or so, and from there, maybe Oricorio-Baile and Oricorio-Pa'u also get looked at. Until next time though, guys, I hope you're having a good life, good time, hope the vibe's good. I'll catch you later. Peace.